lost the strength here. That is not going to be enough to support the torque and the power of any bigger engine. This is structure. The whole car is structure. That's what happens when you build cars from nothing. So in the last video, I got this car stripped, dipped and ready to work on. There's a few areas that need repair, but for the most part it's in good order. I'm not too worried about it. So we're just going to crack on and get this structure mated to the car, or near enough, certainly on the passenger side. And then once we've done the passenger side, we can go on to the driver's side, and then it's just rinse and repeat. Trying to recreate pressed panels, do it in stages, whether it's high-end body shops or something in the garage. So now I'm happy with that. I've extended this lower edge and the top edge so it intersects with the TR7 stuff, just to give me a little bit of extra rather than trying to make it perfect in one panel. Right, so this is a new piece made out of 18 gauge or 1.2 mil steel. And what I've done is, because again this is a pressed piece originally, if I'd have left it on its original fold, it'd have been too far out, because actually it lays in slightly at the top. So I've done a quick cut with the grinder on that edge so we can actually pull it in. I'll clean all that up and then I can weld that back together again. That'll sort that out. The scuttle was rotten on the top. This scuttle panel would have obviously been part of the aperture for the windscreen. So I've just basically sorted this out and made it all look new and decent. Still a bit of finishing to finish off on there, but I've got to trim this up once I've got the A-pillar piece in. Do it in sections. So this is, again, it just needs a bit of trimming up, and then we can trim up the top piece as well. Right, so we've got the chassis rail on the passenger side. I've actually made this in corrugated cardboard that was laser cut, but this is the final piece, which hopefully my measurements were absolutely bang on. I'm just squaring it up to the shell, so we've got everything square underneath the car, but the main thing is it's got to intersect with the TR7 rails at the front, which it does, and I've just blocked it in at the minute just to hold it in place. I'm just going to put some Clecos on the floor just to hold it so I can take it back off again and know it's correct. Right, I'll just grab the tape measure so I can show exactly my alignments. Put a piece of 25mm box, clamped it to the outer sill because there's nothing on the inner sill remaining this end. This end's not too bad, but I've just clamped it together. I know this is level, I know this is parallel to this, so we can measure it off of this, and we can measure it off of the chassis jig as well. So, going by underneath. Right, so extend it out onto the side of that. We are looking at 320mm on the front. It's slightly about 5mm in on that, so I have to push that on my back. There we go. I think it just moved slightly. I tweaked it. Right, 330 front section. 330. This is the joining piece that on the TR7, but it's going to go back on it there, I think, which will intersect, more importantly, link up to the A-pillar panel which I've just made. So that's pretty cool. Strength factor on a monocoque chassis, you have to think, is it structure? Yes, it is. Doesn't matter where it is. Wings, the structure. Don't put fiberglass on, their structure. I think I might have cut out a little bit too much. We're going to cut out the part of the bulkhead here, which we want to keep this flat edge as much as possible, and we're going to intersect back onto it. I've got to do this in a certain order. We're at the moment trying to intersect this structure, the new chassis pieces, and then make a bulkhead end to intersect all that together. Once that's done both sides, I can then start to look at the inner sills the outer sills and getting those in place. So then basically the whole structure of the front of the door is all done front to back again with the sills. That's all got to be done before I can then turn the whole car around and get the rear quarter panels off to be modified to shorten them down, and obviously any repairs that need to be done in the back, which is quite a bit. I'm being a bit mad, I suppose, in converting a Morris Marina Coupe to McPherson strut suspension, but have you ever owned a Marina, and what modifications did you do to your car, either recently or a car you did back in the day, in the 70s, 80s, whatever? What would you do different? What would you do to this shell? Talking about the structure, so the structure is going from a torsion bar suspension to McPherson. Now this is the old chassis rail. You can see how thin it is. Well, not thin, but you can see how narrow it is. But you can see the gussets which are on the back of them, which allow the torsion bar adjuster to run up against, and obviously that's pushing those forces, triangulating it literally in a triangle into the cross brace under the floor. That is not going to be enough to support the torque and the power of any bigger engine. I'd say it's all right up to probably about 150, 200 horsepower, I would say, and that's pushing it. Whatever engine goes in it, the torque of that engine needs to be transferred front to back. So we're going to put the cross brace in the centre, or enlarge the cross brace into the centre, but I'm also going to look at connecting the front and rear suspension together, and having that cross brace in the middle helps us massively when we come to do that. Really what you need to be thinking of is, if the TR7 with McPherson strut suspension has got a much deeper, thicker chassis, then we need to be doing that on this. That has been super scaled to match the TR7 structure underneath, so that everything will be on point. It'll be the same front to back. This is structure. The whole car is structure. So the Marina isn't the most popular classic car on Britain's roads, but I don't care. I'm doing something different. I'm doing something I want to do because I think this is a great idea going around in my head, and I've just got to get it out there onto a car and make it look like it did from the factory, like the car it should have been from day one. Now, what else could I do to this car? We've talked about suspension. We haven't yet talked about the engine that's going in the car. Now the engine is going to be pretty special. I could, where it is now going to be TR7 front, we could use any number of the engines that the TR7 came with from the factory, whether it be the 2 litre, a Sprint engine, or the Rover V8. From the comments in the last video, people have asked, what engine will it be? Are you going to put a Rover V8 in it? And I did want to do a big reveal on that, but the problem is I haven't got the engine here with me to show you. A, because it hasn't been built yet, and B, because I haven't got time to go over to where it's being built to have a chat with them and get them on camera, and that hopefully will be something. If you want to see that, comment down below. But yes, the engine will be a Rover V8. It will be something other than a standard Rover V8. It'll have a bit more pep to it, because we have a bit more room in the engine bay to do something really special. But if you've got any ideas about how we could tune the Rover V8, put them in the comments below. We've had a bit of a play. We've got a new floor panel piece, which is coming off of original points. It's obviously just mocked in place. I've just literally pinned it against the A-pillar panel. This obviously curves inwards. This is obviously quite far out. Up here is just a sort of curved piece of card, but as you go along you're going to be further out. So I just need to do a bit of jiggery pokery on this bulkhead floor panel, but it's looking pretty good. Everything's all gone back together. This is, I think I showed this before, this is the jacking point I took off the original TR7 piece, and if I put it back on, it sits bang on the mark. Everything lines up underneath. You can see that, but it's too short. It's got to come out longer. It's basically about 2 inches too short. We wanted to intersect with that, so it's all triangulated back into itself. So that looks a pretty straightforward piece to make. That's what happens when you build cars from nothing. What axle would you put on this car? I'm trying to keep every part that I'm doing Rover derived. So British Leyland, Rover, Austin. But what axle would suit this car? I'm thinking it might have to be outside of the Rover BL flag, because let's be honest, the only one I can think of is going to be SD1 rear axle, TR7 or TR8 axle, maybe, if we wanted to keep a live axle. I haven't 100% decided how this rear suspension is going to be, but it's going to be probably something like a 4-link on the back end to really sort of get the wheels gripped on the road. But what would you do? What suspension or axle would you fit to this car? Everything has changed. It's all changed. Right, so we've got the chassis rail in. I've had to cut the floor out and I've pinned it with the Clecos. It's now set. I've rechecked it front and back. Front, back to the edge of where the inner sill is, or the floor. So this now is the floor panel, which is matched at the 25 degrees, 45 degrees at that end. This is the intersecting panel here, which is on the wheel well. This is going to be scored. I'll weld this to this, but weld all this, all, yeah. But I've got to square it all back to itself. So at the moment, it's all pinned on the A-pin at the bottom. It's pinned on the inside edge here, where it intersects. I've trimmed this down, but there's a gap, so this is going to be scored and welded. So that'll be one continuous panel. This is all as it should be on the TR7 bits. So now I need to cut the outer sill off, because I just want to get the new outer sill in place, just to check that I've got everything right on this A-pillar panel and the closing end piece, which I've got here to do. The main bit is to check where the floor edge is, where the inner panel goes. As you can see, this, I don't know if you can see that very well, this is the inner sill, the original one, and it's actually bent inwards. It's actually at a bit of an angle, like that. Somebody, when they repaired the floor and repaired the sill, they stoved it in. So I can't take any measurements off of this. Measurement from here, further back, across, yeah, not a problem. Down here, no. So we want to get the outer sill off. A question I got asked was, because we're putting the McPherson strut suspension, TR7 suspension on the car, with all the TR7 structure and suspension, aren't you actually making the BL TM1 prototype? For those of you who don't know, the TM1 prototype was to basically utilise one platform for multiple models. So whether it be the Morris saloon cars, the chassis underneath would all be the same. They'd use the same underpinnings. A very modern way of thinking in today's standards, because that's how manufacturers work now. The TM1 unfortunately got binned. Nothing ever came out of the factory. Certainly no models remain. There's nothing in Gaydon that relates to TM1. I suppose you could argue that it could be TM1. But my basis for this is ADO 77, which is, again, was a cancelled prototype, but it actually was a coupe that they actually made into a 4-door and put a longer wheelbase on it and droop snoot front. So that's probably where I'm more basing it on, is ADO 77, but not making it a 4-door, keeping it a 2-door, but obviously stretching the door. wanted to get the sill off so that I can actually check my A-pillar panel which I've made, that this piece closes the end of the sill, because my genuine sill, unfortunately, I can't trial fit it easily without taking far more off than I want to at this stage, because being as this is a genuine outer sill, it has the sill step in it, which also then goes underneath the quarter panel, and that, believe it or not, there is actually the outer sill, as you can see on here. So I can't easily, I'd have to drill all the spot welds out and all the rest of it, and I haven't got time to do that at the moment. But all I wanted to see was to check that this, so that will close into that. I can't easily show you that right this minute, but you can tell that I made on the laser. I just put an incision in there and close that in, and then we'll weld that back up again, which will look just like the factory piece, which I can show you a picture of now. This may need a bit of trimming to get that to sit right. This door jamb piece, which is all hold, I'm going to have to remake a die up, and then we're going to heat the steel up and then knock it over the die to create that door jamb piece. It's going to be an experiment. We'll see if it works. It should do, I hope so. Now, the other thing I want to show you is the floor. I've cut the floor out. This is literally rubbish. It is on the jig, it is square, so it's not going anywhere, so it doesn't matter how much I've cut out of it, well, within reason. New chassis rail coming off the TR7 bits under the floor. This is where the centre cross brace is at the minute, where it butts up against, just there. That whole cross member is now too narrow. We want a nice beefy cross brace on this, going to be the same thickness as this new piece I've made. So this thickness will basically be what this thickness is, but it'll start in the same spot. There'll be enough space, but the floor itself is going to be remade. The cross brace is massively important on this shell. We're not getting rid of it, we're keeping it. It was for torsion bar suspension, it's now got McPherson strut suspension, but we'll use it because I think having that central brace is actually going to massively strengthen our shell anyway, and you know, why should we, I'm not going to weaken it, and I'm not going to overcomplicate things. But this brace here, which is great, well, let's say we're going to widen it, because this is all hold anyway, and obviously this was for the torsion bar mount and all the rest of it, which is all gone. We'll widen this. We've got the chassis rail coming forwards up into the TR7 McPherson strut. We want to get those forces from the front to the back through that central brace here, and then on the back we can then come off of the cross member, which will be new, as I said, widened, and then we'll come shooting back to hook up with the rear suspension. So tying the front to the back, making it massively stronger. The tunnel is going to be remade. Putting a big gearbox in this. It's going to be an automatic. Sorry to those guys who like manuals. I like manuals as well, but I like a V8 and a bit of laziness to it. So automatic gearbox going in, and so the tunnel's going to have to come up slightly, but we've got plenty of room there. But it does mean I can build a whole new floor in an area I've not seen hold before, which is quite frustrating. And obviously somebody's messed about with the handbrake mount at some point, so that all needs changing. So yeah, whole new floor. Most of the tunnel, if not all the tunnel, is going to be remade. New longer inner sills, which are going to go right to this front panel here. They say it's measure twice, cut once, and with fitting these rails and fitting the subframes, everything else to this car, it is literally like measuring every time any little thing moves. Now, I've got one of these very cheap laser distance measurers, and I've just going to show on the end of the rail, goes on to a little dot on there. Right, so what does that mean? Well, it means the subframe isn't twisted. which is good. So I've noted that down, 0.980. So both at the same time, no trick editing. So that's all we've got time for on this episode. Thank you ever so much for watching. Thank you all for liking, subscribing. Comment down below any questions you want answering for the next video. Follow me on Instagram and Facebook. It's Clayton Speed Cars. I do often put some photographs on there of work I'm doing between videos. And I'll see you in the next one. Take care.